My daughter disowned me for her new rich family. Now she's at my door with a baby in her arms. It's strange the things you notice when your world shifts without warning. That Saturday morning, I noticed the picture frames first. Not that they were missing. No, they were all still hanging along the hallway wall, just slightly crooked. All of them. The way you'd expect after a mild earthquake. Only, we don't get earthquakes in Cedar Hollow, Indiana. I was still holding my cup of black coffee, lukewarm now, as I slowly straightened each frame. Weddings, graduations, birthdays, snapshots of a life that felt less and less familiar. My daughter, Emily, smiling with her cap and gown. Emily at 12, holding the biggest pumpkin from our annual trip to McGregor's farm. Emily at 8, toothless grin, clutching the family dog that didn't make it past her freshman year of high school. And then there was the last one. A family portrait taken just 3 years ago. Back when Emily still called me Dad, with that half-annoyed, half-affectionate sigh. Back before she met them. I couldn't help but run my finger along the glass, tracing the shape of her face. She looked so different now, if the occasional Facebook glimpses were anything to go by. Polished, polite, curated, almost, like one of those department store models. Not the wild-hearted kid who used to build bonfires in the backyard with me and swear she'd never go all boring adult like the others. The doorbell snapped me out of it. It was early. Too early for any of the neighbors, and I wasn't expecting anyone. Setting the coffee down, I made my way to the door, tugging my old hoodie straight. The porch creaked under my feet, and when I pulled the door open, there she stood, Emily. And she wasn't alone. In her arms, swaddled against the sharp March wind, was a baby. A tiny thing, blinking up at me with wide, solemn eyes. My heart didn't know whether to jump or sink. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The wind picked up, scattering the brittle leaves that had somehow survived the winter. Emily clutched the baby tighter, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't decide what to say first. "Hey, Dad," she finally whispered, voice hoarse. "Hey, Em," I said just as softly. You gonna come in, or just freeze out there?" She nodded quickly, stepping past me into the living room. I closed the door, leaned against it for a second, gathering myself. Because if Emily being here was a surprise, the haunted look in her eyes was something else entirely. I turned around to see her standing awkwardly in the center of the room, rocking the baby slightly on her hip. The little one was bundled up so tight I could barely see more than a wisp of reddish hair peeking out. "Cute kid," I said, forcing a smile. "Yours?" She flinched, just the smallest twitch, but I caught it. "Yeah," she said. "Her name's Sophie." Sophie. Not a family name on either side. That in itself was a little jarring. "Beautiful," I said, and meant it. I walked over to the couch and gestured for her to sit. She hesitated, then finally lowered herself slowly, like the simple act of sitting took more energy than she had. "Do you want coffee?" "Food?" I asked. "I've got some leftovers." "No." She cut me off quickly, then softened. "I mean, thanks. Just needed somewhere to go." "Sure," I said easily, but my brain was already spinning. Somewhere to go? Wasn't she living the dream life with the Parkers? Mr. and Mrs. Perfect, with their mansion up on Willow Creek Drive, the country club memberships, the summer houses? Emily had met them during her senior year at college, through some volunteer project. And just like that, she had new parents. Better ones, apparently. Ones who didn't still wear sneakers with holes in them or drive a '99 Ford Ranger. She'd stopped returning my calls that Christmas. By New Year's, she'd blocked my number. By spring, I wasn't even invited to her engagement party. And when I found out she'd legally changed her last name to Parker, well, that was the last blow. I sat down in the armchair opposite her, trying not to show how much my hands were shaking. "Emily," I said carefully, "what happened?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Sophie made a soft noise, a tiny yawn, and Emily adjusted the blanket around her. "It's complicated," she said finally. "And I don't even know where to start." I waited. "I know I hurt you," she said, voice trembling. "I know I was so stupid." "Hey," I said, gentler than I felt. "You're here now. That's what matters. She looked at me then. Really looked. Like she was measuring me against some memory she wasn't sure she could still trust. I can't stay long, she said after a beat. But I need you to help me. Something in my chest twisted. Anything, I said, without hesitation. She swallowed, glanced down at Sophie, then back at me. Her eyes were wide, desperate. I need you to pretend, she whispered. Pretend she's yours. For a moment, I thought I misheard. Emily, what? Please, she said, voice cracking. Just for a little while. Until I figure things out. The wind outside rattled the windows, and somewhere deep inside me, I knew that whatever was happening, it was a hell of a lot bigger than a scared girl showing up with a baby in her arms. I leaned back slowly, studying her, the way her hands trembled, the bruises on her wrists she was trying to hide, the way she flinched at every small sound. And I realized something. She wasn't just running. She was hiding. From who, or what, I had no idea yet. But I knew this much. My daughter needed me. And for the first time in years, I wasn't about to let her down. The house felt different with Sophie in it. Strange how a 7-pound bundle could shift the atmosphere, filling corners and quiet spaces with something fragile and electric. Emily hadn't said much after that first desperate plea, and I didn't push her. Some things break worse when you force them. That night, I dug out the old portable crib from the attic. It was dusty, a relic from the days when Emily was barely more than a handful herself. I cleaned it up as best I could while Emily sat silently on the couch, her arms wrapped protectively around Sophie even after she'd fallen asleep. You can take my room, I said finally, breaking the heavy quiet. I'll crash on the couch. She didn't argue, just nodded, a ghost of her former self, and disappeared down the hall. I barely slept. Every creak of the old pipes, every gust rattling the windows, set my nerves on edge. More than once, I thought I heard whispers. Not voices, exactly. Just a presence. Heavy. Watching. By morning, Emily looked worse. Pale, hollow-eyed, her movements jerky. Sophie, oblivious, gurgled softly in the makeshift crib. I made pancakes, though I hadn't cooked for more than one in years. Eat, I urged, sliding a plate toward her. Thanks, she whispered, poking at the food without enthusiasm. As she picked at her meal, I noticed something else, a small, faded tattoo on the inside of her wrist. 3 interlocking circles. I'd never seen it before. Emily hated tattoos. Said she could never decide on anything she'd want permanently etched into her skin. New ink? I asked casually, nodding at it. She jerked her sleeve down instinctively. It's nothing. I let it go. For now. Around noon, while Sophie napped, Emily stood abruptly. I need to go out. Out, I repeated, startled. Emily, you just got here. Maybe you should. Please, Dad. Just an hour. Her eyes begged me not to ask questions. I hesitated. Okay. She kissed Sophie's forehead, murmured something too soft for me to catch, and grabbed my spare car keys off the hook by the door. I watched from the window as she climbed into my old Ford and peeled out of the driveway like something was chasing her. Sophie stirred, letting out a soft whimper. It's okay, little one, I murmured, scooping her up. She calmed instantly, her tiny hand curling around my thumb. For the first time in years, my heart felt something like hope. It lasted exactly 10 minutes. The knock at the door was polite, almost too polite. I froze, instinct prickling. Through the peephole, I saw a woman and a man, both dressed in dark, crisp suits. Sunglasses, despite the overcast sky. They didn't look like police. Slowly, I opened the door, careful to block their view inside with my body. Can I help you? I asked. Good morning, the woman said smoothly, flashing a badge. Agent Collins. This is Agent Dyer. We're with Child Protective Services. My stomach dropped. We're following up on a report, she continued. May we come in? I gripped the door tighter. Report? About what? We received information that a minor child may be in an unsafe environment, Dyer said. His voice was flat, mechanical. We need to verify the child's well-being. Who reported this? I asked, heart hammering. I'm afraid we can't disclose that. Colin said smoothly. I hesitated a second too long. Sir, she said, a little more firmly. If you refuse, we'll have to involve law enforcement. I stepped aside reluctantly. Thank you, Colin said, breezing past me. They scanned the living room quickly, eyes sharp. Where's the child? Dyer asked. Sleeping, I said. I'll get her. I walked to the crib, my mind racing. Emily. Where was she? How long would she be gone? I lifted Sophie carefully, cradling her against my chest. She's fine, I said, turning to them. Collins moved closer, peering at Sophie. Her professional mask faltered for just a second, a twitch of something like confusion or recognition, before she smoothed it away. What's her name? Dyer asked, jotting notes on a slim tablet. Sophie, I said. And you are? Her grandfather. Collins tilted her head. We have no record of a Sophie Parker born in this county, or in neighboring counties. My mouth went dry. She's new, I said lamely. Born out of state. Collins and Dyer exchanged a look. We'll need to verify that, Collins said. Do you have her birth certificate? Not on me, I lied. They didn't look surprised. We'll be in touch, Dyer said finally. They left without another word. I locked the door behind them, my hands shaking. As I cradled Sophie closer, I realized something horrifying. Emily wasn't just hiding from someone. She was hiding from everyone. And now so was I. The hours after the agents left dragged by like a slow poison leaking into the walls of my house, seeping into the floorboards and curling under the locked windows, where the wind pushed insistently, like it knew a secret it wasn't ready to tell. I held Sophie tightly against my chest, feeling the slow, rhythmic thump of her tiny heart, and wondering how the hell I'd gotten here. An aging man in a crumbling house holding a baby that wasn't supposed to be mine, while outside, unseen predators circled, silent and patient, and certain they would outlast me. I couldn't sit still, so I cleaned. I scrubbed the kitchen counters until my hands cracked from the chemicals, organized the pantry alphabetically, sorted the mismatched Tupperware lids that had taunted me for years, anything to keep from thinking too hard about the knock that might come again, but harder this time. Sophie, blessedly oblivious, slept in her carrier on the counter, her breath soft as moth wings. When Emily finally returned, it was almost dusk. She parked a block away. I watched her from the narrow slit of the living room curtains and walked up the street hunched inside my old jacket, her eyes darting to every parked car and shadowed porch like a fugitive expecting handcuffs at any second. As soon as she stepped inside, she locked the door and twisted the deadbolt 3 times, fast, like a ritual. We have to leave, she said breathlessly, not even taking off her shoes. Tonight. Emily. Dad, please, just trust me. She interrupted, her voice sharp with panic and something deeper, something like guilt. I stared at her, this frantic woman who barely resembled the daughter I'd raised, the girl who used to climb trees taller than the house and dare me to race her to the top. She looked thinner now, shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, of fear that had teeth and claws. Tell me what's going on, I said quietly, keeping my voice low and calm because I knew anything louder would shatter her. She sank into the armchair, head in her hands, shaking. They're not who they said they were, she whispered. The Parkers. None of it was real. I didn't speak, just waited, feeling the blood rushing in my ears. They promised everything, Emily continued, her voice hollow. College tuition, a job, a future, a family that actually cared. They said they'd help me become someone. She laughed bitterly, a sound that didn't belong in her mouth. At first it was little things, she said. Trips, connections, fancy dinners where you have to smile even when you don't understand the jokes. But then there were rules. She looked up at me then, and I saw it, the crack in her soul. I had to change my name. I had to cut ties. No phone calls to you. No visits. They said you would pollute my image. Her mouth twisted around the words like they were acid. I agreed. Because I was stupid. Because I wanted it so badly. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. And Sophie? I asked, glancing at the sleeping baby. Emily's hands clenched into fists. They said she was the final step. she said. A real heir. They chose. She broke off, biting her lip so hard I thought she might bleed. Emily, I said, dread pooling in my stomach. Who's Sophie's father? Silence. The kind of silence that roars. It doesn't matter, she said at last, voice small. What matters is we can't let them find her. She stood, pacing, her movements jerky. I thought I could get away clean, she said. I thought if I gave them what they wanted, they'd leave me alone. But they always want more. There was a knock then, a soft tap-tap-tap that sent Sophie stirring and Emily freezing mid-step, her face draining of color. Don't answer it, she hissed. Another knock, this time more insistent. Dad, please, she whispered, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. Please. I nodded slowly, heart thundering. We retreated to the back of the house, Sophie still half asleep against my chest, Emily trembling beside me. Through the kitchen window, I saw them. 2 black SUVs idling at the curb, men in dark coats scanning the houses. My mind raced. Options. Exit routes. I wasn't young anymore, but I hadn't spent the last decade getting soft, either. I knew the backwoods behind the house better than anyone. Come on, I said gruffly, grabbing the emergency bag from under the sink. Packed years ago out of habit more than fear, but maybe some part of me had known this would come. We slipped out the back door, leaving it swinging gently on its hinges. The woods welcomed us like old friends, the tangled branches swallowing us whole. We moved fast, branches clawing at our clothes, the ground slick with last week's rain. Sophie whimpered once, but Emily shushed her with the desperate tenderness only a mother on the run can muster. I led them to the old maintenance road that used to service the fire tower, long abandoned and half-eaten by weeds. My truck was still parked where I left it after hunting season, hidden under a camo tarp and years of habit. Emily climbed into the passenger seat, Sophie cradled tightly, while I wrestled with the stubborn ignition. The engine roared to life, loud and terrible. Hold on, I muttered, gunning it down the overgrown path. In the mirror, headlights flared as the SUVs found the back road. They're following. Emily gasped. I see him, I said grimly. The tire spun on the mud but caught, and we surged forward, branches whipping the sides of the truck, the windows rattling under the strain. It felt like the trees themselves were reaching out to stop us, dragging bony fingers across the roof. There's a split up ahead, I said, remembering every curve, every ditch. Left or right? Emily didn't hesitate. Left. Always left. I obeyed, skidding onto the narrower track, praying the old bridge over Pine Hollow Creek was still intact. The first SUV tried to follow, but misjudged the turn and fishtailed into a stand of birches. The second kept coming, relentless. Who are they? I demanded over the roar. Emily just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. We made it to the bridge, barely more than rotted planks strung over fast, dark water, and I didn't slow down. The wood groaned under our weight, but held. And then we were across, crashing through another wall of trees onto the old service road that wound back toward the county line. In the rear view, the second SUV screeched to a halt at the edge of the bridge, unwilling to risk it. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. We bought some time, I said grimly. Emily clutched Sophie tighter, sobbing quietly. Dad, she whispered, there's something I have to tell you. I glanced at her, heart sinking at the haunted look in her eyes. They're not coming after us because of me, she said. They're coming for her. She kissed the top of Sophie's head with shaking lips. Because she's not just their heir, Emily said, voice breaking. She's their insurance. I opened my mouth to ask what she meant, but at that moment, my phone buzzed violently against the dashboard, screen lighting up with an unknown number. One message. You can't hide her. She belongs to US. I crushed the phone under my boot instinctively, sparks flashing. Emily watched me, eyes wide and terrified, as the truth began to unravel, strand by poisonous strand around us. And deep inside, where the worst fears live, I knew we were only at the beginning. The night swallowed us whole, the truck's headlights barely cutting through the dense mist that rolled like a living thing across the cracked, forgotten county roads. Emily sat rigid beside me, one hand constantly resting on Sophie, as if sheer willpower alone could keep them safe, and I gripped the wheel tighter than necessary, the muscles in my arms aching as I navigated turn after turn by memory more than sight, feeling like the darkness around us was not merely absence of light, but something thick, something sentient, breathing and watching and waiting. Neither of us spoke for a long time, the only sounds the growl of the engine and the occasional hiccup of breath from Emily when she thought I wasn't listening. Sophie, miraculous child, slept on, her small fingers curled into tiny fists of trust, oblivious to the nightmare that had grafted itself onto our once simple lives. After an hour of driving nowhere in particular, just away, always away, I pulled into an old hunting cabin I hadn't thought about in years, a place so far off any official map that even the deer looked surprised to see people. And we sat there for a moment, the engine ticking as it cooled, before Emily finally broke the silence. "You deserve to know," she said, her voice a ragged whisper in the dark. I didn't rush her. I knew the importance of the pause before a confession, that sacred terrible space where truths waited to be born or buried. "It wasn't just money," she said, staring straight ahead at nothing. "The Parkers, if that's even their real name, they didn't want a daughter. They wanted—" She faltered, struggling for words. "They wanted a vessel." I frowned, confused. "They told me," Emily continued, tears sliding silently down her cheeks, "that their bloodline was dying, that they needed a child who could carry it forward." The way she said it made my skin crawl. "They picked me," she said bitterly, "because I was young, healthy, and most important, desperate." I reached for her hand, but she flinched away, curling in on herself. "They had doctors," she said. "Clinics, tests, procedures. They said it was all for the baby, for Sophie." Her voice broke entirely then, and I felt my gut twist with helpless rage. "Emily," I said carefully, "what did they do to you?" She shook her head violently. "It's not about me anymore," she said. "It's about Sophie. She's different." I stared at her, words failing me. "She has something they need," Emily whispered, "something they put inside her." The trees groaned outside as the wind picked up, and in that moment I realized I had crossed some invisible threshold, that this was no longer about family feuds or legal custody battles. We were entangled in something much older, much darker, something that had worn the Parker's skin like a costume. "We need to leave the state," Emily said fiercely. "New identities. Disappear." I nodded numbly, the weight of it all settling onto my shoulders like an avalanche. As I helped Emily inside the cabin, locking and barricading the doors with old furniture, I thought about every bedtime story I'd ever told her, about monsters defeated by bravery, about villains unmasked by cleverness and heart, and how none of them had prepared me for the reality that sometimes the monsters didn't hide under the bed. Sometimes they invited you into their home, and sometimes they smiled while they took everything you had. The night inside the cabin stretched into a long, suffocating silence broken only by the occasional pop from the ancient wood stove and Sophie's soft, rhythmic breathing from the bundle of blankets we had arranged on the old couch. Emily sat curled up in the corner, her arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the dancing shadows on the walls as if she could find an escape route hidden somewhere between them, and I paced the worn floorboards, feeling the old panic rise again, this time sharper, colder, as if some part of me, some primitive, animal part, finally understood that we weren't just hiding from people, but from something much worse, something that had worn human faces long enough to convince the world they belonged. Around midnight, when even the woods outside seemed to hold their breath, Emily spoke, her voice no louder than the crackling fire. "You ever heard of the Ashford Covenant?" I stopped pacing. "No," I said slowly, my mind already filing the words away, weighing them. Emily drew a slow, shuddering breath. "They don't exist officially," she said. "No websites, no news articles. But if you dig deep enough into the old court archives, into missing persons reports from the 70s, into private adoption records that aren't supposed to exist, you start seeing patterns." She looked up at me then, and there was something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not fear, not even hatred, but a terrible kind of certainty. "The Parkers," That's just one of their names, she said. They move around, change names every few decades. They find families, vulnerable ones. They promise them everything. Her voice cracked. And in return, she said, they take something back. I sank into the chair across from her, hands trembling. What do they take? I asked, barely a whisper. She closed her eyes. Bloodlines, she said. Legacies. Bodies. The room swam around me, the old cabin groaning under the weight of the truth, hanging in the air. Sophie, Emily whispered, isn't just a baby to them. She's the next vessel. I shook my head, struggling to understand. A vessel for what, Emily? She laughed, a hollow, broken sound. For who, Dad? She said. Not what? Who? Outside. Something howled far off in the woods, and the baby stirred, letting out a soft, troubled whimper. They've done it before, Emily said. I've seen the photos. The heirs. They're always perfect. Always eerily similar. Generation after generation. The same cold eyes. The same smile that never reaches them. She buried her face in her hands. And Sophie. She choked. They said she was the purest match they've ever created. The pieces started clicking into place, slow and terrible. The sudden adoption. The isolation. The procedures. Not just to raise a child. To build one. A knock shattered the quiet. 3 slow, deliberate taps against the heavy wood door. Emily jerked upright, her face drained of color. They found us, she gasped. I grabbed the rifle from above the fireplace, dusty but still loaded, and motioned for Emily to take Sophie and retreat into the back room. Go, I said, keeping my voice low but firm. She hesitated only a second before vanishing into the shadows. Another knock. Not urgent, almost polite. I moved to the window, peeking through the frayed curtain. A woman stood there alone, her hair pale and perfect under the moonlight, her hands clasped calmly in front of her. She wore a simple black coat, no jewelry, no visible weapons. But it was her face that made my blood run cold. She looked familiar, too familiar, because I had seen that same face in an old, yellowed photograph tucked away in my own mother's attic. A photo taken 50 years ago. Different name. Same eyes. Same impossible, ageless smile. Mr. Carter, she called softly. We just want to talk. Her voice carried through the wood like smoke. This isn't about your daughter anymore, she said. Or even you. A pause. It's about fulfilling a promise. Another pause. A promise your family made to us a long, long time ago. The floor seemed to tilt under my feet. Because somewhere, buried deep in family lore, there was a story. A story my grandfather used to tell after too much whiskey, about the price we paid for survival. I had always thought it was just a metaphor, just a story. But now the story had come calling, and it wanted Sophie. For a long moment, I stood frozen by the window, the firelight flickering against my face as the woman outside waited, calm, patient, certain. She knew something I didn't. Not just about Sophie, not just about Emily, but about me, about blood debts older than memory, about bargains struck in desperate, forgotten nights, bargains I'd never agreed to but had inherited nonetheless, stitched into my DNA like a sleeping curse. Behind me, Emily held Sophie so tightly I thought she might disappear into her arms, her breathing ragged, broken. She knew, somehow she had always known, that this was never about just her choices. Never about her rebellion or her need for a new family. It was about the binding we all carried without even realizing, a binding that had finally come due. Mr. Carter, the woman called again, her voice soft, persuasive, as if inviting me to a neighborly chat over coffee and pie instead of a transaction that would end my world. This doesn't have to be painful. You've already given so much. You just need to finish what was started. The old rifle in my hands felt heavier than ever. A useless relic against whatever force stood on my porch. Still, I gripped it tighter, not because I thought it could save us, but because I needed something, anything, to anchor me against the tide I felt pulling at the very edges of my mind. Emily stumbled into view, her face streaked with tears and defiance. We're not giving her up, she said, her voice shaking but strong. You can't have her. The woman outside sighed, as if disappointed but unsurprised. "There are other ways," she said, "but they are less merciful." The unspoken thread hung heavy between us, and then, like a switch being flipped, the woods around the cabin exploded with movement, figures emerging from the darkness, pale and swift and wrong, their faces familiar but not, echoes of faces from family albums, from lost childhood memories, faces that belonged to people who should have been long dead. I backed up, slamming the wooden beam across the door, heart pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. "Upstairs!" I barked, grabbing Emily's hand now. We scrambled up the narrow stairs, Sophie wailing now, the sound raw and terrified, and barricaded ourselves in the small attic room where once, long ago, Emily had built forts out of old blankets and dreamed about the stars. "Dad," she whispered, clutching Sophie close. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The first crash came against the front door below, the whole cabin shuddering under the impact. I shoved an old dresser against the attic hatch, knowing it would buy us only minutes. "Listen to me," I said, forcing her to meet my eyes. "There's a crawl space under the eaves. Leads out back, down the slope. Take Sophie. Go." "No," she cried. "Not without you." "Emily, listen," I said, the words tearing from me. "They're here for me too. It's not just about you. It's not just about her. It's about finishing the bloodline, tying up the loose ends." Another crash, the sound of wood splintering. "You have to survive," I said fiercely. "You have to be the one who breaks this cycle." "But, go." Reluctantly, sobbing, she crawled into the narrow passageway, disappearing into the darkness, Sophie cradled tightly against her. I turned back toward the hatch, just as it gave way, the dresser sliding with a groan across the floor. The woman climbed through first, her movements too smooth, too deliberate. Behind her came others, faces I recognized but couldn't name, ancestors twisted into something unholy. "Where are they?" she asked softly. I lifted the rifle, not to threaten, but to stall, to distract. "Gone," I said simply. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "A shame," she said. "You could have made this easy." They advanced. I fired once, the sound deafening in the confined space. The bullet passed through the woman harmlessly, as if she were smoke-wearing skin. I didn't fire again. Instead, I drew them toward me, away from the crawl space, every step buying Emily and Sophie another second, another breath. The first blow hit me hard, knocking me back against the wall, pain flaring white-hot through my ribs. But even as they closed in, even as darkness edged my vision, I smiled. Because I heard it, the faint creak of the back hatch opening. I heard Sophie's cry carried away on the cold night wind. I heard freedom. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the woman's face. Not angry, not triumphant, but almost sad. "It always ends this way," she murmured. When I woke, the cabin was in ruins, the walls scorched and blackened, the roof half collapsed. I lay among the ashes, broken but alive, somehow spared, somehow cursed to remain. Of Emily and Sophie, there was no trace, only the faint, lingering scent of smoke and lilies and old promises broken. I pulled myself to my feet, every movement agony, and staggered outside. The woods were empty, but far off on the horizon, I thought I saw it, a figure running, tiny and fierce, a baby cradled against her chest, the rising sun casting a new dawn behind her. They were free, and for now that was enough. The bloodline's curse might still hunt them, but so would hope. And sometimes, that's enough to rewrite even the oldest promises.